Good morning, class 6. Welcome to our today's lesson. And the topic is food and nutrition. The subtopic is we have food preservation. When we talk about food nutrition, this has been a topic all the way from class 4, where we are discussing the food groups. And in class 5 again, we talk about the food groups and deficient diseases. The disease caused due to the lack of certain foods in our bodies. And nutrition, something that we also looked at, especially in class 4, where we define nutrition as a process of obtaining some substances to the food that keeps our body healthy. These substances that ensure our body to be healthy called the nutrients. So nutrition comes from nutrients. The process of acquiring nutrients is what we are calling nutrition. At this point, we want to look at how to preserve food. At home, sometimes at home, we find ourselves in a situation where we have more foods, we have prepared food more than enough, or we have budgeted, we went shopping and we have excess food. So how are you supposed to store this food? Here, I'm here to guide you how to store food so that the food does not go bad and you avoid buying and wasting of our resources. So when I'm talking about methods of food preservation, we have two methods. We have the traditional methods, how long people, traditional method, and then again we have modern method. Traditional method, we are going to look into the olden days. The olden days, these are the days before coming of a white man. We want to look at how these people used to preserve food. In olden days, people preserve food by simply drying it. Have drying, that was stand drying. That's one of the traditional methods. Then we have salting. We have use of honey. We have use of low temperature. We have use of low temperature. We have drying, salting. We have smoking. Lastly, those were the traditional. In modern society, we do have drying again, mostly practiced with the farmers. People growing crops, the grains, and whatever. The best method for them and the cheapest method for them to preserve is by sun drying. Dry them, and when they are dried, it's easier for you to store them. They won't go bad easily once they are dried. Then again, in modern society, we still have low temperature. We still have the use of low temperature. And this one, low temperature, is widely used. This is a common method in urban centers. In towns, we have gadgets that allow us to use low temperature. For example, we have the refrigerators. These are the fridges. And we have the cold rooms. Cold rooms, what are the cold rooms? Cold room is a big room. It's a big room where perishable food are stored to stay for so long. Where can you once see a cold room? Cold room that mostly seen in supermarkets. When you go to supermarket, you have a section where you have soft drinks there, kept in a large section there to keep them cold. We have seen drying. We have drying on both sides. Drying, it was in traditional days, and modern days we also have drying. Use of low temperature. Long ago we had use of low temperature. In modern society we are still using more low temperature. In modern society you can also add honey. Here in town we are well much conversed with the canned food. These are foods still in container and sold in supermarket and shops. You can go and purchase them. The food is stored safely, and it won't go bad until expiry date is passed. Before expiry date, the food is preserved good and you can still use it. So now, having looked at the modern traditional, at this juncture, allow me to take you through each method. We want to discuss each method and look into how to preserve food and give you example of food that is preserved by each method. To start with, we want to start with number one, that is drying. Drying, this is a simple method. You just spread food in the sun, and when you're drying, what are you doing? You are removing moisture in the food. Dried food can go long without going bad because moisture tends to make food to rot easily. So example of food that can be dried. Example of food that can be dried, we do have meat. We do have fish. Example of food that can be dried, we do have what? Meat, fish. We have the grains. These are harvest. We have fruits. We have herbs in modern society, and then lastly we can talk about vegetables. Certain type of vegetables that are dried and then crushed, stored to be used later. These are just examples of that can be dried. Then another area where you need to put more concern, or you need to discuss about drying, it is how drying preserves food. It preserves food by removing water from the food. It does remove water from the food. When you're spreading your foods there in the sun, what are you doing? You are mainly removing water through a process known as evaporation. Once water evaporates from the food remains dry. Dried things can go long without going bad. Next we have smoking. Smoking, it is used to preserve food such as meat, all type of meat, and talk about what? And talk about fish. These are commonly food that is stored by smoking or were stored by smoking. How is it done? Smoking mostly is done by setting fire and then having something like a wire mesh above fire, and you do to spread your food above it. So the food is being dried by the heat coming from the fire and the smoke. And how happens? The smoke will cut the food. It will produce something called soot. It will cut the food. Once it cuts the food, it makes the outer skin of the food or the outer layer of the skin to be hard. Once the outer layer of the skin becomes hard, it will be hard for decomposers. Decomposers, these are small organisms that destroys food. Good example, we have bacteria and fungi. What happens? The outer skin of food has been coated by the soot or smoke. Now it becomes hard for these bacteria, decomposers, to penetrate into. Hence the food stays without bacteria, and that food will go long without getting bad. It preserves food by if you are forming hard layer so that bacteria will not enter, what are you doing? You are keeping off the bacteria. The bacteria will not be able to penetrate into the food and destroy it. Hence, once something is stored out of free bacteria, that thing will not be decomposed because bacteria are agent of decomposition. Then we have use of low temperature, number 3. Use of low temperature. The use of low temperature. Low temperature was used in modern days. It is used in modern day and traditional days also. People use low temperature to preserve perishable foods like milk and also to keep drinking water cold. Traditional days they use clay pots to keep drinking water cold. They just collect water and then they put that water in clay containers, the clay pot. When water stays there, when you go to fetch that water, you find the water is a bit cold and good enough for you to take. And again, they also use to preserve food through a process that is well explained in primary science class 6. I'll require to go through it. But let me just take you through an overview of how low temperature can preserve food. In modern days, we use low temperature, but now we'll use the most improved one by using the facilities like refrigerators and the cold room. But I had explained what's a cold room. It's just a cold room. This is a big room or a big space where food are just stored there, and the temperature is a bit low there to preserve so that that food does not go bad. Good example, we have one within us here in Bamburi. You got the section of fruits there, the section of juices. You found some juices are kept in a container bigger like ours. Something big to the extent that is a fridge somehow, but not a fridge. Is a section set aside to be cold and to preserve food for that purpose. So example of food that can be stored under low temperature. These are any food that is highly perishable. It's used to preserve perishable foods. It's used to preserve perishable. Any food that is highly perishable, it will best be preserved by the use of low temperature. Perishable, what does it mean? It means that things that go bad easily, things that spoil easily. Good example, you have milk. Milk is highly perishable. If you have milk today, fresh milk, if you don't store it well, after a day it will be sour. And a good example, have something like vegetables. Those are the tomatoes. You have meat, you have fish. They need to be stored under low temperature. How does it preserve food? It preserves food. It preserves food by deactivating or inactivating bacteria. How does low temperature preserve food? It preserves food by deactivating or inactivating bacteria. What does it mean? In short, it means making bacteria not active. Bacteria, remember, that living things. Living things survive well under a given temperature. When the temperature has been lowered or increased, then the environment will not be conducive enough for their survival. For example, take a look at yourself. If you are closed inside the fridge, what will happen? If you are locked inside the fridge, after some time, you will find that it will become inactive. So that's what happened to bacteria also. The bacteria are being deactivated, they become inactive, and after some time they die completely, and that food stays without bacteria. And if the food stays without bacteria, it won't go bad. It will be kept fresh. The fourth one, we have salting. Salting was used in traditional days. How was it done? It was done by simply spreading salt on food or making something that later will be explained as you move on with your science, especially class 7 known as brine. Brine is a salt solution. These are salt solutions. You take a salt solution and you dip your foot there in salt solution. What happens now? The salt is a thing that will do it. It will remove water from the food. It will suck water from the food through processes that will be explained later on as we move on to the science. What is a solution? Solution is simply a mixture of anything that can dissolve in water with water. We call a solution. A solution now, salt solution, you take water and you add salt in it. Then you stir completely so that the salt disappears in water. What you have at the end in science, it is not water, it is salt solution. Why? Because it's a mixture of salt and water. A mixture of salt and water, call it salt solution. And in more advanced way, we call it what? Brine. So it was done by, you can just take salt to sprinkle over the food, or you dissolve salt in water, couple the solution, and then you dip your food in that salt solution. What happens? It will suck water from the food, or in short terms, it will dehydrate the food. Example of food that was stored by salting, we have, good example, you have meat and fish. How was it done? How does it preserve food? I've already explained. It preserves food by dehydrating the foods, or in simple terms, removing water from the food. It removes water from the food, that is dehydration. Hence, like we explained earlier, in dried foods, food that does not have water, it won't go bad as the one with water. A point to emphasis here on salting. I said salt removes water, and again I said drying removes water. When you come to this, the difference between the two, they all remove water, yes, but drying removes water completely. Salting won't remove water completely. It removes, yes, but it won't dehydrate completely as compared to drying. That's a question to be asked. Which of the following method of food preservation dehydrate food completely? I have said it dehydrate, yes, but if the question is about completely dehydration, then the answer will be drying. But if the question is about dehydration, then the answer will be salting. You answer question when it comes in exam. Next, after talking about salting, we have use of honey. We all know what is honey. Product given by bees. How does it preserve food, and how do we use it to preserve food? It's so simple. What happens here, you take a glass or a container containing honey and you dip your food in that container. You take your food, the food you want to preserve, and you just dip it in a container containing honey. Or you take honey and you spread it, you smear it on the food that you want to preserve. Mostly is used to preserve food such as, we still have meat, still have fish, and others. So as you do a research, as you read, you add an example. But these are the common ones, these are the major ones that are preserved by the use of honey. How it preserves food I've already explained. The way it preserves, the way it is used. Just take a container. Take a container. For example, this is a container containing honey. Then you dip your meat inside it. The meat will sink in honey and will be covered by honey completely. Or you can take your piece of meat and then you smear honey around it. That's how it's done. When you look at the edge of the honey is a bit thick. And honey is not porous. It's not porous. Porous meaning it doesn't have pores. Hina, mashimo. It's not porous. What does it mean to say it's not porous? That means that air cannot penetrate into honey. And so bacteria. Bacteria can also not penetrate into honey. So that means that when you are putting things in honey, or when you are coating food with honey, air and bacteria will not get into that food. And that's how it preserves food. It preserves food by preventing entry of air and bacteria. That's how honey preserves food. You have put something inside the honey, and we remember honey have said that it is not porous. It's very thick. And when I talk about honey particles, they stick together. They have a high certain type of force. We call it cohesion force, making these particles to stick together, not to allow anything to penetrate into it. So air and bacteria will not get into. Remember, bacteria and air plus water, that the common agent of food destruction. They destroy food easily. But once you keep food away from bacteria, away from air, and away from water, there's high chance that that food can go long without going bad. 61 we have use of the 61 we have what? 61 we have canning. How is it done? And how does it preserve food? I want you to have two answers as far as each method is concerned. As far as each method is concerned, the most important thing to me, as far as class 6 syllabus is concerned, is for you to identify these methods, the modern and tradition, you need to know them. Number one. Number two, how each method preserves food. If it is salting, how does it preserve food? Then again, the type of food that can be preserved through a given method. So how can you carry out canning as a method? First of all, it is done by heating the food. You heat food or you warm it at a very high temperature. Why are you boiling it? Why are you heating food at a very high temperature? You are doing so to kill the bacteria, to destroy bacteria completely. And then what happens? You take the foods. You take hot foods and you pack them into containers. Take foods and you pack them into containers. The hot foods. Don't cool them. Pack. You pack hot food in container and you immediately seal them. You have heated food to a very high temperature. Before cooling, you take food, you put them in a container like down and holding, preferably use the metallic containers, put them, and then you seal immediately. And when you are filling, you fill food to the brim. The brim, what do I mean? You fill food completely. You don't leave space. Jaza food kabisa ijae. Hata ikiwezekana sikunulia vizuri. Then you sit there and then. Don't give it time. You seal it when still hot. Pack hot foods in tins and then seal them when still hot. What happens after I've sealed the hot foods? Remember the principle of science, the principle of expansion, what we explained in class 5. We explained that hot things expand. This hot food has been expanded and you have packed them when they are still expanded. When they cool in the sealed container, they will contract. When they cool in sealed container, the food will contract. The contracting food will leave space between the lid, the covering, and the surface water. It will leave space there. The space left with the contracting food, it's called a vacuum. There will be a vacuum there. A vacuum is an empty space, a space with nothing. And remember, I have sealed again. So what does it mean? It means that bacteria cannot be able to penetrate, and air will not be able to enter that food. The food can be kept for quite a long time without going bad. As long as the expiry date is not expired, it is still within. Create a space, and I call it an empty space or a vacuum. Create a space between and the food level in the container. So this is a vacuum. This space is a vacuum. Being a vacuum, that means that nothing can survive there. Living things, they need a space where you have air. Without air, there will be no survival. It will suffocate. So that means that nothing can survive there. And if nothing can survive there, then we say canning preserves food by keeping off air and bacteria. By keeping off air and bacteria. So to assess what I've just taught here, I'll have to give you some few questions, and please try to work them out and you send to Mr. William Bunde for marking. You don't send to me, send to your online science teacher class 6. I'm not your online science teacher. You send them to Mr. Bunde for assessment. That is it. Very questionnaire enough to assess what I've just explained today on the blackboard. So you try to do them and do them gently, do them well, you be gentle, and make sure you cooperate at home with your guardians or your parents during this time when you are at home. We are not there to watch you, so please watch yourself, and whatever you do, make sure you do things the way that it pleases your parents, and above all, the one that will please our Creator, and that is good. Bye for now. Let's meet in January.